He wasn't tall. He wasn't handsome. His jawline was soft, his shoulders narrow, his face forgettable. In a kingdom that praised perfection, he was invisible. Where men flexed for affection and women praised symmetry, he was background noise, a shadow that passed behind louder lives. And yet, he married the most desired woman in the entire kingdom, not with gold, not with beauty, not with fame, but with something most men never touch, his mind. And when they asked how, truly begged to know, he gave a single answer. While you were chasing women, I was becoming the man they'd chase. That line would echo for generations. The land was not poor. It glittered with indulgence, but it starved for substance. Men chased every curve and perfume like dogs chasing falling leaves. Their strength performed, their confidence painted on, their souls fragile. One sang beneath a window, another spilled wine and praise. A third memorized poems he didn't understand. They called it love, but it wasn't. It was worship. It was performance. It was begging wrapped in perfume. Here, a man's worth wasn't built. It was borrowed from the attention of women. And so they fought, not to become better, but simply to be seen. Far from the palaces and painted smiles, lived a man who didn't chase. He didn't perform. He didn't post. He didn't play the game. He was short, plain, name forgotten, clothes simple. But every morning before the city stirred, he rose, not to impress, to prepare. He read, not romance but kings. He wrote, not to be admired but to understand himself. He trained, not for abs but for readiness. He wasn't cold, he was clear. And in a world of noise, clarity is power. Stillness, in a man, is misunderstood. They fear it, because they don't see hunger in his eyes. They don't hear begging in his voice. They think he's arrogant. They say, who does he think he is? He's too average to act that confident. But he wasn't acting. He simply was. The truth? He had removed need from his system, and in doing so, he became untouchable. But even warriors wonder. There were nights, long, sharp, silent nights, where the candle flickered, and his own thoughts turned against him. Is this discipline, or is it fear? Have I chosen solitude, or am I hiding from love? Will anyone ever see me, truly see me, or am I wasting my fire in a room no one will enter? He didn't numb it. He sat with it. The loneliness cracked through his ribs, not the modern kind, scrolling and sighing, but the kind that asks you, build meaning or be devoured. And so, he did what most men never dare. He built anyway, even in doubt, even in silence, even when it hurt. While the kingdom lost itself in performance, he built himself in silence. Others rehearsed flirtation. He studied war. Others stayed up late hoping for a reply. He rose before dawn to stretch and train. They memorized compliments. He memorized the laws of Caesar, the letters of Marcus, the blade of Musashi. He wasn't trying to be attractive. He was trying to become sovereign, not admired, unshakable. He studied architecture to understand structure, philosophy to understand purpose, and pain to understand himself. He didn't want followers. He wanted command over his own mind. And slowly, the kingdom noticed. It began with whispers. A baker's daughter saw him and said, he never stares, but he sees everything. Then another, there's something in his walk, like a man who owns time. And another, he's not even handsome, but I can't stop thinking about him. The whispers grew into fire, and the fire brought temptation, not just attention, desire. Women came, not just peasants, but nobles, beautiful, powerful, magnetic. They brought wine, skin, music. He listened, he smiled, then returned to his scrolls. Not because he didn't want, but because he had trained his hunger to obey his mission. Lust, unearned, is the enemy of legacy. Some nights it stung, not being chosen, not being praised, but that's what made it sacred. While other men took anything, he waited for something. Every low-quality woman you give your time to weakens the man you could have become. He wasn't above temptation. He had simply studied it. He knew the dopamine tricks, the hormone spikes, the mirage of desire. Lust is a sugar rush for the soul, sweet for a moment, sickening after. He didn't want a sugar rush. He wanted sovereignty. So he waited, built, sharpened, let the others burn out in chaos. He would burn slowly into something immortal. In that silence, he heard something new. His voice, not the voice others gave him, not the voice of doubt or insecurity, but the voice born of ink and blood and sweat, a voice that whispered truths. No one is coming to make you a man. No woman will complete what you abandoned. If you are alone, build something sacred from it. He did, not all at once, but piece by piece, ritual by ritual, law by law. Each day he buried the weaker version of himself. Each morning he stood over its grave and began again. He no longer lived in a room. He lived in a temple, built by discipline. No mirror on the wall, only books, a blanket, and a wooden desk scarred with work. He didn't care how his face looked. He obsessed over how his thoughts looked. Each dawn he asked, "What belief must die today, so I can rise?" His shelves were lined with the forgotten minds of men: Seneca, Epictetus, Musashi, Balthazar Gracian. He didn't read to sound wise. He read to become dangerous. A man who knows what he wants and does not flinch is more terrifying than an army. He forged laws. Never speak more than necessary. If you are doubted, nod. Power is not noise. Power is control. He wasn't training to be liked. He was building a throne inside himself, one no woman could tempt him away from. And when he walked through the streets, they felt it. Before he spoke, before he entered, the weight of a man who no longer needed to be seen. He saw her once, then again, then again. She didn't try to be noticed. She didn't dress for attention. She moved through the market like water, calm, measured, certain. No giggles, no perfume trails, no glance over her shoulder to check if anyone looked. And yet, everyone looked, including him. There was something about her gait, like time moved around her. She studied medicine. She read poetry, not to quote it but to understand its blood. She volunteered, with no audience. When she walked, he would one day say, it felt like the world parted to make space. They spoke rarely. A nod, a shared book in the library, a glance in passing, never held too long. No flirtation, no games, just silence, and the gravity inside it. But slowly she began walking where he walked, reading what he read, training where he trained, without saying a word. He didn't chase. He invited. She didn't beg. She mirrored, and together they began to orbit. Two moons, pulling at each other without touching. They didn't say they were in love, because love is too small a word for a bond like that. He could feel it, the crossroad, where discipline meets desire. This woman wasn't like the others. She didn't try to seduce. She didn't try to belong. She simply was, complete, which made the decision harder, because if he stepped forward now, it would not be to impress. It would be to lead. You don't choose a woman like this to be seen, he told himself. You choose her to build with, and building demands sacrifice. He sat with the question for many nights. Will she cost my clarity, or amplify it? Until one morning, as they walked side by side through a silent corridor, he turned, not rushed, not rehearsed, and he said, "You walk with strength. Shall we walk together?" She paused, studied his face. "So long as your path stays true," she said. And so it began. Not a romance. A reign. They didn't throw a wedding. They didn't send invites. They didn't dress in silk or throw flowers. They stood together, one morning, in a quiet grove. No audience, no applause. She placed her hand on his chest. He placed his hand on her back. No rings, no vows, just breathe and presence. And the understanding, we are not merging, we are aligning. Their pact was unspoken but iron-bound, to protect each other's solitude, to sharpen each other's thinking, to raise not just children, but standards. That night, they undressed without hunger, touched without proving, spoke without needing to be heard. And when he held her, he didn't feel like a man who'd won. He felt like a man who had finally met his match. There was no desperation, no rush, no fumbling for closeness, only breath, only weight, only silence, full of meaning. They made no promises, they made no plans. Just one truth hovered in the space between their bodies. This is not the end of our loneliness. This is the beginning of something sacred. She didn't make him forget who he was. She made him more of it. And for the first time in his life, he allowed himself to rest, not in comfort, in alignment. Because a man who walks alone for long enough only kneels when he knows it's home. They didn't buy a mansion. They built a school, not of grades, but of thought. A place where boys learned to speak only after thinking, where girls were taught that self-respect mattered more than charm. They called it the circle, not for hierarchy, but for reflection. A place where fire met water, where clarity was currency. She taught medicine and restraint. He taught silence and philosophy. They didn't sit on thrones. They sat in the dirt beside their students. "Build your name," he'd say, so strong that you don't need to say it out loud. Years passed. The city changed. But when they returned, heads turned, not out of envy, but unease. The same men who once laughed, now looked away. The same women who once ignored him, now watched him in silence. He didn't dress differently, he didn't walk louder, but something had shifted. He no longer moved through the kingdom. The kingdom moved around him, and beside him, the most beautiful woman in the land, unapologetic, unflinching, unbothered. They didn't hold hands to be seen. They walked like matched swords, two forces, one flame. He didn't raise sons to be charming. He raised them to be decisive. Charm fades, discipline doesn't. He taught them to observe before they speak, to say no, not rudely, but ruthlessly, to hold their attention like it was gold, because it was. At dinner, he asked questions, not to test them, but to temper them. What belief did you question today? What did you deny yourself? What weakness did you bury? And when they answered foolishly, he didn't scold. He sharpened. You don't lead by yelling. You lead by embodying what others cannot fake. She was not behind him. She was beside him. She didn't demand attention. She commanded it by how little she needed it. She taught girls how to stand without screaming, how to choose love not for safety, but for alignment. She told them, don't wait for a prince. Build your own silence. And when the right man arrives, you'll recognize him by how still he makes your soul. She wasn't a queen in title. She was a queen in posture. And to him, she was not a reward. She was a mirror, not a muse, a match. He no longer chased days. He carved them. His calendar wasn't full. It was forged, like a war map. While other men chased weekends, he chased decades. In 5 years, mastery. In 10, dynasty. In 20, legend. Most men filled their time. He shaped it. And when others asked how he stayed so calm, he replied, because I don't trade time for attention. I trade time for control. He wasn't loud, but he saw everything. At dinners, he didn't dominate. He observed who laughed too hard, who flexed when insecure, who smiled only when looked at. Most men listened to reply, he wrote. Rare men listen to understand the battlefield before the war begins. He knew who would betray, who was pretending, who wanted him close, only to steal his fire. He judged no one, but he trusted only patterns. One morning, older now, white in his beard, stillness in his bones, he wrote a letter to his younger self, to the boy I once was. Thank you. You were ignored, mocked, tempted, but you waited, you fought, you stayed hungry. And because of that, I no longer serve the world. I command my corner of it. He folded the letter, placed it in the same notebook he'd started as a boy, and smiled. Not because he had everything, but because he built everything from nothing. He didn't write quotes. He wrote laws, not for followers, for blood, for legacy, for sons unborn. They weren't poetic. They were brutal. If she tempts, pause. If she mirrors, proceed. Make your presence earned. Never reveal your full ambition. Power lives in unpredictability. Your attention is currency. Don't hand it out like coins. A king who needs to be liked will lose his crown. Never bond over wounds. Bond over standards. You're not free until you can walk away from beauty. You're not powerful until you can walk away from praise. He didn't memorize them. He became them. And that's why the world couldn't move him. Because he didn't live by emotion. He lived by code. He didn't disappear. He withdrew, not from life, from noise. He walked through forests, sat in ruins, wrote in cities that had forgotten how to slow down. He didn't preach. He embodied, and those who were ready followed without being called. Let them shout, he whispered. I will observe. Let them fall in love with noise. I will marry silence. He had become what he once admired, unreadable, relentless, respected, not because of how he looked, but because of how he moved. There was no crown, no fanfare, no song, only a morning, only a pen, only a man writing quietly, with the weight of his own journey resting in his hands. The man who married like a prince was simply a man who mastered himself like a king. And when they asked how he found such a woman, how he built such a life, how he became untouchable, he simply said, I never chased a queen, I built a kingdom within myself, and the right woman found me there. This story was presented by the Marble Sage, where masculinity is forged, not faked, no motivation, no fluff, just discipline, awareness, and the work it takes to become a man. If you made it this far, you're not like most men. You waited, you watched, you listened. That tells me you're building something real. So if this story sparked something in you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with a man who's ready to rise. And drop a comment below. Which part of his journey hit you the hardest? Or which rule from his code are you going to live by starting today? The kingdom is waiting. Become the man worthy of ruling it.